Hello, and I am Jess from Steep Reviews, and I'm hoping to explain to other music fans how to listen to albums, or more specifically, how I learned to overcome the hype machine with music. So, you probably looked at the title of this video and thought, this is stupid. I know how to listen to albums. You just go on to Spotify or iTunes, or you type the darn thing, or you just go onto YouTube and you type it in. Just click the video and hit play, that's it. Well, technically you're correct, but half the time we are rarely listening to just the album. Albums have been around since 1948, and critics have been dissecting and ranking music long before we were born and will continue to argue and critique long after we go. Everywhere you look, someone has a list. Best hip-hop records, best 90s albums, greatest albums of all time from NME, Spin, and Rolling Stones. Imagine you are just getting into older music, and you read from 12 separate publications that Sgt. Pepper's is the greatest album of all time. So you decide to give it a listen. But the truth is, you're not actually listening to Sgt. Pepper's. You're really hearing this. To not a few people, Pistachio Beatles, Lonely Hearts, Panoramic Lonely Hearts, Rock and Roll, So how do you avoid this? First off, listen to the album for what it is instead of what you want it to be. This can be hard at first, but the best mindset to have is that any hype behind an album is simply a recommendation from a lot of people, instead of some holy scripture that must be adhered to. You don't have to like the Beatles, but you also aren't giving them a fair shot when you're trying to tear it down, or playing other albums in your mind and thinking, this isn't better than these. Sometimes, you're just missing the context for why an album is so highly regarded. It's easy to listen to something like The Velvet Underground today and think up a list of albums that rock harder, or go weirder, or are more subversive. That's because many of those same bands listened to Velvet Underground when it first came out and were inspired. In fact, the Velvet Underground were recording years before many people first started doing hard rock, heavy metal, all these various subgenres that came forth after they released their first few albums. Oftentimes, the most heavily regarded albums sound cliched and dated only because of mountains of copycats that filled the airwaves. After the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper's, everyone was putting trumpets in their pop songs, and even their rock songs. Other times, the work involved pioneering audio engineering. For example, in 1967, the Beatles had to put a tape recorder into a pipe organ, play it back at full volume, have multiple other tape recorders there to recreate the full sound that came out, then repeat that process 5 more times to get the proper amount of reverb they wanted. Today, you can do all of that with just one button in Logic. And sometimes they didn't even have the proper equipment to even make the sounds, and in the words of engineer Jeff Emmerich,
except from Revolver, to get some of the things on Revolver, I had to abuse the equipment.
In order to get some of these songs to sound the way they did, they had to literally cut apart speakers, break them. Backmasking was actually a mistake that was found by the Beatles when they put the tapes in the wrong way, and it ended up becoming a common practice in music. In the end, the main point of this tutorial-esque video is to stop you from depriving yourself of great albums. Listen to what's there and forget all the praise and hype and expectations. You should use the critics more as a guide of stuff to listen to, not as a guide that tells you this is what you're gonna like. Oh, you'll love this. You'll love this album. You'll love this album. Because we're all individuals with different tastes musically. In fact, not everything jumps out at you immediately music-wise, and you might just find that some albums need more time to grow. If you want to see some examples of albums that grow with time, come visit my Wordpress, Steep Reviews, and share this video the next time one of your friends calls a recommendation you gave them overrated. Thank you for listening, and I hope this has been informative.